Nobody? Okay, I'm going to start screen sharing. How do I do that, Vince? Oh, I found it. Can everybody see this?
Yep.
Okay. So bear with me because it's so much, I would prefer this be in person because I'm going to have to flip and moderate the Zoom. I'm going to have to be reading the teacher's guide, and I'm going to try and read the participant guide. So if you guys can follow along and keep me where we need to be, it would be very, very helpful. But basically, what we're going to focus on today is we are going to work on negotiating the deal. We're going to break down and apply common tactics and points to negotiation. We're going to analyze and recall counter tactics. We're going to go over the 3 Ps, and we're just going to put some practical application to all of that. So breaking down a little bit further, what we're going to focus on today is really negotiating contracts, you guys. So this is the next part in the Ignite series. I know that because of Good Friday, Josh didn't get to teach on Fridays, so you're gonna have a session that's a little bit out of order tomorrow. So really one of the most integral parts of what we do is negotiate transactions, right? This negotiate contracts. This is really a pivotal point in the process. It is important to find a common ground. It's important to go for a win-win. This is going to be our basic agenda for the day, you guys. So we are going to first break down the common points of negotiation and what that means. We are then going to go to the 3 Ps and approach that and put that into common practice for negotiation. We're going to analyze counter tactics and what that means. We're going to employ the 3 Ps and do some role playing and give you some boots on the ground scenarios. We're going to recap and create your success list, and we're going to discuss daily habits. So, first thing to consider is negotiation is a bargaining process, you guys, between 2 or more parties. We are going to try to reach that common ground, and we're going to try and reach an agreement, settle a matter of mutual concern, or resolve a conflict. A long time ago, someone told me that unlike attorneys, where we walk into a courtroom and somebody walks out a winner and somebody walks out a loser, we are not attorneys. Our job is to bring parties together into a win-win scenario, right? So we really have negotiations in 2 parts of our contracts. Does anybody have any idea what 2 parts those are?
The 2 sides.
I'm sorry?
The 2 sides.
Well, no, there's 2 phases of negotiations. First, we are going to negotiate, and it's called
The offer.
Phase.
Oh,
The
I'm
offer
sorry.
phase.
Offer, and I would say there's actually 3 if in the event that there's a short appraisal, but the offer, inspections, and then if there's a short appraisal.
Absolutely, Buffy. So really what it is we have that offer phase, and then they call it in your book the option period, but that's because obviously this class is written on a national level. We would call it here at Buffy, to your point, the escrow period, right? So not only are we going to negotiate remedies and repairs, but we can negotiate through cut appraisals, through anything. So it says here, and you guys, again, you're gonna have to bear with me. We're supposed to break into small groups, but we're not gonna do that, obviously. So, so let's have conversations around this right now if you guys have a list. How can your ability to negotiate affect the outcome of a deal? What are some ways that we negotiate in our everyday life? What are skills that a great negotiator possesses? And what is asking questions important? Why is asking questions important when negotiating? So let's first go, how can your ability to negotiate affect the outcome of a deal? What does that mean to you? Jack, Curtis, anybody?
I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, if you can negotiate the deal, you're going to be much more successful for your client.
For sure. What are some of the ways we negotiate in everyday life?
I think for people who have children, they're probably great negotiators because they've got to, you know, try to get the young ones to do what they need them to do without where everybody wins.
You know what, I think that brings up a great point, Buffy, and I say that a lot when I'm training my agents or talking to other people. You know, it can be when we are dealing not even with another party, but dealing with our own client, right? Talking to our client about terms and conditions. And they are going to ask you the same question, just like a 3-year-old, 5 different ways to see if they can get the answer they want to hear. What we have to be as fiduciaries in the contractual process is understand that no matter how many times someone asks us a question, the answer is the same. I think this is critical, and I'm going to bounce all over the place because I think that was a really good point, Buffy. So I'm bouncing a little bit all over the place. I think that is a really good point when another agent is machine gunning you or asking you questions or trying to dig for something they need. It doesn't matter what they say to me, my answer is going to be the same 4 times to Sunday. Does that make sense? Don't let someone throw you off, you guys. Which would lead into what are some of the skills that you think great negotiators possess?
Hey, Julie, I will chime in.
I love it, Jack.
The ability to listen, the ability to stay calm and analyze situations and understand none of them are all exactly the same.
That's really good.
And that goes right
Say-
in.
Oh, sorry.
No.
This is Vanessa. I would say compromise at the same time.
Absolutely. It's always about the win-win. Like I said before, we're not attorneys. We're not trying to walk into a courtroom and someone walks out a winner and someone walks out a loser. Our job is, as a fiduciary, is to remain neutral and find a win-win. And sometimes that means pushing our client, and sometimes that means trying to talk to the agent and find out what is important about where we're stuck to their client, right?
I think too, Julie, it's important to maintain the other person's dignity. So, you know, even in, I mean, you'll be in situations and it's clear that the other party just may not be as informed. And so providing information that can be helpful, but just also maintaining their dignity. Like they're not a bad person. They just may not, you know, understand, you know, the situation. And so explaining, but maintaining.
I think that's a great point. Can you go a little bit deeper on that? Are you talking about maintaining the dignity of your client or
Both.
right.
Anybody that you're dealing with in the transaction, just
1,000%.
yeah, just keeping in mind, like, hey, this is another human being, and they may not understand the situation. Explain it to the best of your ability. Even when somebody's being nasty, unfortunately, it does happen.
It really does.
It does, unfortunately, and just. I'm sorry, I'm at a walkthrough for a new
That's
deal,
okay.
so.
I keep turning my
but-
volume up.
Yeah, so I mean that's it. Just again, just keeping calm. I think Jack said, and then just maintaining that other person's dignity, even though sometimes you might want to choke them out. You just have to kind of, okay, I'm not going to allow myself to get dragged into this, but I'm going to make sure that you have everything you need, and we have everything we need in order to get to a successful conclusion.
You know, and I think that brings up a great point, and we're going to probably talk about this throughout this entire day today, but it's about removing our emotional thought process or our emotions from the transaction to be better fiduciaries for our buyers and sellers. I will tell you, in the 15 years that I've done this, and I know Jack is on here and other people, I have learned very, very I've learned the hard way, and I feel that I, at this point, have a very strong control over it. But I literally have been so mad at other agents I could spit. But not only would that other agent never know it, my clients will never, ever know if I'm upset with another agent, because I will always go back to my client because they're already going to be upset about something. They haven't responded to a counter. They haven't paid attention to the time frames. They haven't acknowledged receipt of our offer, right? These are ways in which it is our job as fiduciaries to break that emotionality, right, in our clients. Vince, if you're keeping an eye on the chat, let me know, because I see that it's blinking, but I can't see it.
Julie, just speaking of that, there are some decent agents out there, because I made
There's
a rookie mistake, and this agent really, well, his client was nasty. She called me at home on her own and told me all kinds of things, like I had to change my commission, whatever. But there was something that they were supposed to fix, and I thought I had written in there specifically that it had to be a licensed contractor. Well, when they returned it, they'd take it out licensed, and it wasn't fixed properly. And he came through, not his client. He came through and had it fixed. And I think he was stunned, because I handed him a letter thanking him, just for, helping out a rookie, basically. So there are people out there that, that want to keep those relationships, and I hope I can return that favor to somebody someday.
absolutely. And I think that brings up a good point, because as someone who's a little bit more seasoned, I'm going to tell you guys, I've received counters and offers from agents, maybe not in this market because things get a little crazy, right? So we're receiving so many. And I have called agents before and said, are you sure you want me to present this to my seller? Why don't you take another look at it? Or, I remember Jack Curtis, who's on here, when the contract first changed, this was 3.5 years ago, and it went to I think calendar days, Jack, or something for the walkthrough. And instead of 2, I put 48, or it went from hours to days. And I put 48 hours and 48 and thinking it was 48 hours for a walkthrough. And I remember Jack texted me, he's like, are you really going to do the walkthrough 48 days before? And I'm like, well, no, but thanks for being cocky about it. I'll do it 2 days before. So little things like that. So there are really 3 possible outcomes, you guys, when we present an offer, right? It's either rejected, it's countered, or it's accepted. So let's talk about brainstorming through the negotiating process a little bit. So what type of potential issues can come up during this process, right? Things like price, moving date, repairs, closing costs, furniture, household goods. Can anybody tell me 1 or 2 things they've struggled with during that phase?
One of the things that can be an issue is, possession. And really, I think it comes down to asking questions to get information about what's most important to not only your client, but what are the needs as opposed to the wants of the other party as well.
Right.
But
So ultimately, we always tell our clients, and David can expound on this, at the end of the day, a contract will come down to 2 things. It will come down to price and possession. But right now, some of the terms that a seller is looking for can supersede price and possession, right? So you guys should be on page 5 right now of your participant handbook. It talks about common points of negotiation, right? Pricing and terms. So let's look at some of those and talk through some of those, right? So sales price is always going to be, for most people, in most cases, the primary factor in negotiations. It is not necessarily always going to be the bottom line. And I can tell you, as a listing agent, strong listing agent, where that comes into play for me. A seller can receive multiple offers right now for the same price. So those other terms are what's going to make the difference. And that's what we're feeling right now, you guys, in this market. So let's talk about, even though they may not be relevant to this market, remember that my job is to teach you what these things mean in any market, right? And then let's talk through what it means to the current market and talk through how you may use it in a different market. Because there could be agents on this Zoom that this is the only market they've ever known, and I've worked in different markets. So we need to understand when we head back to that market, it's gonna feel different in how we present those offers, right? But things, if you're looking on page 5, that can affect negotiating are closing cost, a closing date, conveyance items, earnest money and option fee, which obviously option fee is we don't have that in this market, and repairs. Does anybody have that seller or the page 5 up? Are they looking at those terms?
Yep.
Does anybody want to read a couple of those and we could talk about them?
I feel like I'm in kindergarten. I could read.
Okay, good. I like it.
Which one do you want me to read?
Closing costs.
Closing costs. Traditionally paid by the buyer, closing costs are in addition to the purchase price. Securing the cash to pay these expenses can be difficult for some, especially for first-time home buyers. Therefore, the seller may be asked to pay a portion of the closing cost. When you represent a seller, make your client aware that it's common for buyers to ask for them to pay part of the closing costs and what their options are.
Yeah, we get that. You get that a lot where your buyers are watching HGTV or whatever, and they say, now I heard that the seller is supposed to pay my closing costs. What I always say to my buyers is, well, we can definitely ask for it, but understand that the seller doesn't list their home and think, now I have to make sure I cover my buyer's closing costs. So if we're gonna, it's very important to some buyers that they get those closing costs because of the costs of moving and the costs associated with buying the house. They're strapped for that money. So it's really important to them. It's not a want, it's a need. They must have those closing costs. So you have to, I always tell my buyers, if we need that $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 or whatever it is, we need to make our offer above that amount that we need to be commensurate with the amount of closing costs you need. So we're not taking away from the seller's bottom line with our offer. So if you need $3,000, let's go in at $253 instead of $250, and that way our offer is going to look like the seller's still going to net this amount, if that makes sense.
Does everybody understand that? Am I screen sharing?
That makes sense. I see you, Julie. But,
Okay, that's fine. I just thought we would talk through these so we could all see each other a little
well,
bit.
I can see it on my page. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Julie. Yeah, David brings up a great point. And I got, some people just say, hey, ask for it every time. Just their buyer. Why not try it? First of all, in today's market, nobody's paying points on the seller. Seller aren't paying any points.
Correct.
Today, this crazy market. But when it does go back, and it will, and it happens again, as a buyer's agent, don't get stuck in a rut of, oh, well, I'm going to ask for it every time just because somebody told me, or some attorney or some teacher or some whatever said always ask for closing costs. Dave's exactly right. It is necessary for some buyers, but not all. So if it's not necessary, don't get in a rut of, oh, I'm just going to ask for it every time. And clearly, in my opinion, when I used to present offers that had it in it, clearly the first thing we did was, okay, it's listed at 150. So that's great. They did go over and above like David suggested, which is great. It's 153. So at least they said, we'll give you your price, but we need this help.
Right.
And that clearly you just take it right off the top of the price and tell the seller, this is really what the price is. So that's my point of, don't do it if you don't need it. It is necessary at times. It's what real estate is. There's no set rule that every single thing you do all the time.
That's why
look
it's
at the
called
situation,
the art of
analyze, and then go from there and advise. As the professional, advise based on the situation, which everybody's situation is different.
Without question. And what it comes down to, you guys, is this conversation should be had before you get to this point with a buyer. You should know as you're developing a rapport with them and as you've done a consultation with them and you have their pre-qual in hand, do they absolutely have to have some closing costs, closing consideration to help? And what I've said to buyers in the past is every HGTV show you watch, every website you click onto will tell you not only to beat a seller up in price, this is old days, not new days, but to ask them for closing costs. Bear in mind, to Jack's point and to David's point, that closing cost comes right off the seller's bottom line. And this is another way I say to buyers, most sellers do not look at fair market and list their home for fair market and then add $3,000 onto the price they were going to list it at to cover a buyer's closing costs. The home is listed at fair market. If you need closing costs, that's upon you to decide how you are going to negotiate that in with your buyers. It is not a seller's responsibility to ever consider when they're listing their home at fair market value that they should list over and above to cover a buyer's closing costs. That is not a consideration.
Hey, Julie, it's Buffy. One of the things that I tell my buyers when I do the initial consultation is that in the lender, because the first thing I talk to them about is their pre-approval, getting a pre-approval. And I let them know that I'm actually going to be reaching out to their lender to have a discussion with their lender to understand how they work, what that buyer needs, how soon they can close, all of those things, even if it's a lender that I've worked with before, because I want to make sure I can write the strongest possible offer for that client. And I do it every single time.
And you should be. Did everyone hear that? You should, whether you have advised or they've chosen a lender that you've given them, right? We should all be giving 3 names, but we all work with preferred lenders, let's be honest. You should be having conversations with that lender too, or have enough of a rapport with them that you understand where the buyer's cap is, right? Okay, we're skirting the ability of my buyer being able to move forward with this contract, or it's going to be very tight. On the common points of negotiating, we still have closing date, conveyances, earnest money, and option fee, which we don't have an option fee here, and repairs.
Hey, Julie.
Yes.
Vanessa did have a question for Buffy about some type of listing questions or a list of questions that she ordinarily asks a lender in regards to Buffy's last comment.
Well, let's
I actually have a list that I created. I created a book like some time ago when I had my own brokerage. And so are you asking me to share that, Vanessa? I'm sorry, I can't. I'm at a walkthrough, so I'm not able to really see anything.
She said yes, please, Buffy.
Yeah, I'll send it over to you. And anybody else who wants it.
If you can send it to me, Buffy, then I'll get it to Rachel, and when she sends out the video, I'll make sure we put it like in the files on the Facebook page and email it out to everybody.
Okay, I'll send it to Vince. Okay, thanks.
Wonderful. I need to be. Go ahead, David. What can you guys see right now? Just all of us, or am I sharing my screen? I'm sorry, you're gonna have to bear with me. I'm gonna ask that 1,000 times.
I just see you, Julie, but I have the information pulled up on my full screen.
Okay.
I was going to say, I think a lot of it is asking questions of your client to find out what their wants and needs are, trying to ask questions of the other party's agent to find out what their wants and needs are, and trying to figure out what wants they're willing to sacrifice in order to protect their needs, and use that to your advantage in your negotiations.
So it's always going to come back to communication, right?
And questions, asking questions.
Always going to come back to asking questions. So,
hey, Julie.
yes,
this is Michael. I think another, common that we've seen recently is also like that appraisal gap, having that conversation with the lender to make sure that they have what they need to show those proof of funds if they're offering an appraisal gap. Even from a seller standpoint, calling when you receive offers of appraisal gaps, calling the lender, because I've had instances where the lender did not know that they were trying to do an appraisal gap, and those funds were in cash and not seasoned, so they couldn't be used, which would have killed the deal. So I think that's another huge part of since we're seeing a lot of appraisal gaps.
Does everybody understand what she just said about seasoning? Because that was a real life situation on our team that Michael and I talked through, and we actually had, how many offers did we have on that house, Michael? That was Timber Ridge, right?
I think it was around somewhere around a dozen.
Yeah. So what she means is we're seeing appraisal gaps as very common negotiating tools in this market. It's crazy to me because I've been doing this 15 years, and it just is baffling to me that we're seeing that much and people bringing that much extra to the table. But what she's saying is if they're agreeing to bridge an appraisal delta, and I'll just use $25,000, meaning the home, if it doesn't appraise, they're willing to bring up to $25,000 more to the table, right, to ensure that we meet that contractual price. How are you as an agent verifying, a listing agent or a buyer's agent, ensuring they really do have that $25,000? Are you having conversation with your buyers? Are you having a conversation with the lender? In this particular case, it was a buyer's agent that may not have been as seasoned, but we actually talked to the lender and found out that the buyer literally just had that cash in their house, meaning it had to be deposited and it would go through a 90-day seasoning rule to even be applicable to this transaction. So that knocked that buyer out. Does everybody understand that?
Yeah.
Okay, you guys should be on page 6 right now of your participant guide. We're going to talk through the list of negotiating tips. Darn it. Sorry, you guys. We're going to talk through the list of negotiating tips. We're going to brainstorm about negotiating and how we can be stronger in this market, and even how we can talk through when the market shifts, how that's going to look, right? So does everybody have page 6 up in your participant guide? I'll just read through some of them and then let's just brainstorm and role play. Are we ready? Number 1 is my favorite. Above else, always be professional. Remember, our goal is to not only get a signed contract as a buyer's agent and a listing agent, it's to bring 2 parties together. This is what we're driving towards, right? Control what you say to anyone involved in the transaction. If you create anxiety in your client or other parties, you're reducing their leverage in negotiations.
I think that's a really important one. I think a lot of unseasoned agents don't do that, and they create that anxiety and that tension with their own client by telling them things they don't need to know.
Have we all done that?
Yeah, we've all done that. But I think the more you do it, the more times, the more deals you do, the more clients you work with, the better you get at that, like anything. But that is very important, to control what you say, control some of the information that you have. You know, don't come back to your client and say, well, the seller said basically screw you. You know, because that's not going to be the benefit to your client in the long run to get what they want.
Well, you know, I think these negotiating tips, to your point, David, are really important. Let's just go back to the top, because I have, you know, let's talk about what does always be professional to you guys mean. And I'm going to tell you my favorite thing here, and we'll go down through these. I think we should spend some time here and really dive deep into negotiating and professionalism and all of this. So I want someone to guess on this call, someone who hasn't talked. When do you think negotiating as a buyer's agent, when do you think you start negotiating with a seller? Tell me the first moment you think you've started the negotiations.
I would say when you first submit the offer.
Close.
When you call them to let them know you are submitting the offer.
We should always be doing that. Go back further.
When I set up the
when I go to
show,
the house, yeah, when I go see the house.
Amen. The minute you walk into a seller's property with your clients that they own, how you act, how you behave, how you pay attention to the showing instructions, and how you give your feedback set the tenor for how that transaction can go when you present an offer.
Yeah.
Does everybody realize that, how important that is? I'm going to tell you right now. And I keep referring back to Jack, he'll laugh. Over the last 15 years, I've obtained 3 listings when we were in a buyer's market, not a seller's market, because of the feedback I gave through showing time. And when those listings expired, over 15 years, it's only 3, but 3 people called me to come list their house because of my professionalism, my follow through, and my detail, and that I always showed grace. And I'm honing in on this point because as a listing agent, and I'm sure Jack would agree and other people who do a lot of listings, it is extremely important to me and the relationship with my sellers that a buyer's agent respects how we've asked them to behave in the home, especially because a lot of times you're being videotaped right now, and that you provide me with detailed, real, gracious feedback. There's a way to say that home is filthy. I want you to give me feedback. Obviously, if you walk into a listing and it's filthy, something has happened. That seller's agent has not set the right expectation with that seller, and they need that feedback from you guys to help work through that. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
So, who was it? Michael Bean was telling me that he had a house shown, and whoever the person showing the house was empty, but the person still lived in town. The door was left unlocked. We're talking like a $2 million house. The door was left unlocked. They hadn't taken their shoes off, so the floors were filthy. So if the next person gives that feedback, you know, at least you know what's up. And unfortunately, the guy found out and wasn't very happy. But
Listen, think
like you're talking about with feedback, you would have known.
Well, and I'm going to tell you, things happen and we all make mistakes. But, you know, I've had sellers call me and say, I don't know what that agent is doing in that house right now, but the kids are jumping on my furniture. I mean, I've had those calls. I've had to, remember that, David?
Yeah.
I've had to, instead of calling the agent and creating a bad tenor, what I did is I got in my car and I drove to the house. Hey, I thought I'd pop in and see how it's going. Right? Because I am not going to I'm not going to allow that emotion of my seller to come through me to that buyer or that buyer's agent. My job is to kind of just be the buffer and start to control that emotionality.
Can you also give some pointers about when feedback is provided about things that literally cannot be changed, like the location of the home or the amount of bedrooms in a home, and how that should look and how typically that's received?
Well, I think that you guys have to remember, I think that it's really about it's communication and conversation. I had a listing that was a 3-bedroom. You know it's a 3-bedroom when you're looking on the MLS, or that it's a 4-bedroom and one of those bedrooms is in the basement, and sellers become frustrated. Why are they looking at it if they needed more bedrooms upstairs, right? And, you know, that is a conversation with the buyers, with the sellers at that point, right? You know, well, a buyer is gonna view our home just like they're test driving a car, you guys, right? So they need to, you know, they see that there's 2 bedrooms upstairs, 1 on the main floor and 1 in the basement, and even though they have 3 kids, they think maybe they could make it work, right? So it's continually, I'm never going to call an agent and say, why would you show it? Why would you give that feedback? For me personally, and Vince, I'm not sure if this is where you were going with that, I'm going to address that emotionality between myself and my seller. I'm going to get ahead of things like power towers, right? The big, through Lewis Center, we have all the power towers. You can actually do testing on those now and put those in the MLS. You can put remarks. Justin on my team just had a listing. We only chose, which is the first time in my entire career, to do exterior photos. He put some remarks in the agent to agent remarks. You know, seller had a sense of urgency because they found a property to list. Please excuse some of the projects that we're still doing. Carpet is in the process of being replaced. This is in the process of being done. It all goes back to communication, right? And conversation. Vince, is that what you were leaning towards there?
Yes.
Anybody have any questions about that or comments? Okay, so we'll go to number 2. Remember, your goal is to get a signed contract. What are ways that we're working towards keeping our clients to have a sense of urgency? And we can go right into control what you say to everyone involved in the transaction. Refer back to buyer's motivation. Listen more than you talk. Don't be attached to the outcome. What do you guys think and feel about those?
Those are all skills that you have to develop, especially listen more than you talk. That's a good one.
That's a very good one. My biggest problem is I'm attached to that outcome.
Yeah, me too.
Who said me too?
That was me, Sparkle. I'm attached to the outcome too because I want things to work out and go through.
Right.
And sometimes they just don't.
I want paid.
That's not a good one, Lori.
Okay, so we all can be passionately attached to the outcome because we love our clients. We're obsessed with walking the journey with them. We want them to be in a home. But we still have to remove our emotionality and anxiety and keep them upbeat. Right now, I think it really comes down to setting expectations. I mean, let's be realistic. How many offers are we going to write for certain buyers before we go into contract? Because I know, go ahead, David.
A lot.
So we really have to be removing our emotionality and keeping the buyer upbeat, right? So be talking to them about setting expectations about the reality of the market, how many offers they may actually have to write, right? Keeping them excited. I think a good point here is when we're talking about negotiating, I'm going to stop my screen share and I'm going back and forth, is before you even put an offer in, we just talked about behaving in the home, doing proper feedback. But right now, you guys, knowing that these homes are getting, 90 showings and 23 offers are coming in, how are you preparing to present an offer before you even go back, have the showing and go back to write it? Are you guys proactively reaching out to listing agents and saying something like this? It might look like this. I'll role play with Lori. Hey, Lori, I'm getting ready to show 123 Main Street. And I just wanted to reach out and ask you, other than price, are there any other terms that would be palatable to your seller as I discuss the home and walk through it with my buyer?
Well, yeah, they're kind of in a problem. Their house isn't built yet, so they're going to have to be able to stay in there 2 more months once it sells.
Okay, so you'd really, would you be interested in a longer possession after closing, or would your sellers be open to a longer closing date?
They'd really just like to go ahead and have the longer possession.
Understand.
That would work better for them.
Okay, wonderful. I'll keep that in mind. And I'm going to shoot you an email and follow up to our conversation. And if there's any other, attributes to the home that we might be missing or you don't have attached to the MLS, I'd love to be able to share them with my buyers. So if you could shoot those over to me as well, I'll share them when we're walking through.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.
Things
And
like
Julie-
that.
Julie,
Go.
why would a normal closing and longer possession be more palatable to a seller?
A normal closing and a longer possession. Well, that's one of my favorite topics to talk
There you
about.
go. Why can't we just extend the closing and that way we don't have to worry about this possession?
Anybody have any guesses?
I want to make sure this house is sold. I want to make sure I got my money.
The seller wants their money.
Absolutely, Buffy. And here's
And you
what
want your money.
Well, to be honest, more than anything, anything can happen. I would tell my sellers will tell me, well, we'll take a delay. Well, I have this conversation when I'm listing the home with them. We talk about pre-negotiating up front. So ultimately, the fact of the matter is it's in your sellers and ultimately the buyers, to be honest, when you think about it, best interest to close as quickly as possible. Anything can happen and things change. Someone loses a job. Someone spends something on a credit card. Someone decides they want to get a divorce, right? Anything happens. The quicker we can make it to the closing table, the better it is for all parties. I would much rather close in 2 weeks, 30 days, and work out a 6-week possession than I would ever do a 3-month delayed closing. Does everybody understand that? Time is of the essence in negotiating and in closing. And speaking to Buffy, this is where having a relationship, even as a listing agent, we're always reaching out to buyers, lenders once a week to make sure that they are, if they need anything from us as a listing agent. Has the buyer made full loan application and completed their intent to proceed? The next week, has the buyer given you all their documentation? Oh, by the way, we've gone through our inspection period. When will the appraisal be ordered? It is your responsibility as a listing agent or as a buyer's agent to continually be touching and talking to that lender to ensure that your buyer has given them all the documents they need in a timely manner and befriend them and continue to have a relationship. So as much as you're talking to your buyer, you should also be touching base with your lender. I'm assuming everybody does that here.
I do. And sometimes it's not just because I don't think my buyer is doing what they should, but sometimes the lenders need a little push too.
A lot of times.
Okay, well, you have more experience than me.
With the listen more than you talk, Julie, can you share your secret weapon that you're a master of? You know what I'm talking about.
Stop saying stuff like that. So that's actually comes further. We're really not following on course here, but I have learned over the years to be comfortable with the uncomfortable silence. If I'm on the phone with another agent and I ask them a question, I promise you I can out-silence you all day long. I've literally been driving in the car with David and ask an agent a question, and I'll put the phone on mute and look at David and go, how long do you think it's going to take for them to respond? Because I'll drive clear across town. It's become a game. Does anybody understand why that's important?
That's a negotiating tactic, really.
If I ask a question and I just shut up, 95% of the time, the person responding is going to answer. And then if I'm just quiet, they're going to say, and this, and this, and this, and this. So a lot of times I'll find out what I need to know in any scenario by just asking a question and be quiet. And by the way, this works really well with your buyers too and your sellers, right? Give me a little bit more information about that. Why is that important to you? How can we back into those timeframes? Right? Ask questions and be quiet. I don't know if I'm a master at it, but I've learned to be comfortable in the uncomfortableness of it all. Does that make sense?
She tries it with me too.
We're not bringing our personal life into this, but. Any thoughts on that? Nope, nobody's got nothing.
I'm being quiet.
Listen more than you talk.
So now we're going to examine the 3 P's of negotiating.
What about not being attached to the outcome?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that as we get into the 3 P's too. Prepare, present, and position. So you guys should be on page 7 of your handout. Again, prepare. Preparation is key. We're going to build confidence and ensure a smooth negotiation process.
To page 8?
Page 7 and 8, David.
Okay.
Negotiating is a skill. It can be learned and perfected with experience. The best practice for negotiating and bringing the buyer and seller together are these 3 P's approach. The 3 P's approach. So prepare. And now you're going to be on page 8, David. Know your goal. Have a clear goal of reaching a win-win agreement in which both the buyer and seller are satisfied with the outcome. Remember, win-win. Remind your client of the motivation throughout the process, right? And I've even been known to say to my clients at some point during the process, you know, regardless of how the other party may be behaving right now, let's keep our eye on the ball, right? what would our next move be here, right? Does anybody want to read any of these, or should I keep reading? I'm going to keep reading. Go ahead. Who was that?
Vince.
David. Oh, Vince, sorry.
Go ahead.
Know
Vince.
your client. Make sure you fully understand your client's goals. Learn the areas in which they are willing to negotiate and where they will stand firm. Think ahead. Anticipate what the other party wants out of the negotiation. Write down how you think they may counter the offer and how you plan to handle it. Set clear expectations. Prior to meeting with the other party, set clear and realistic expectations with your client. Then under-promise and over-deliver. Stress the importance of moving quickly to create a sense of urgency. Part of setting clear expectations with your client is being clear that win-lose agreements are likely to be rejected by the other side. To set yourself up for success, make it win-win. Be informed. Before making an offer or counter-offer, it's good practice to speak with 2 other agents. Ask open-ended questions and use active listening to find out as much as you can about the other party and their agent. This helps you know with whom you are negotiating, at what point you will negotiate, and where you and your client have leverage. Obey the laws. Every state and locality have their own set of laws that regulates zoning, mortgage qualification, and other real estate matters. Stay current on your local regulations and stay out of court. Know the documents inside and out. Become familiar with your local Board of Realtors governing forms. Take the time needed to understand the form templates and what belongs in each field.
So let's talk through that a little bit. Prepare and learn. Does anybody, I think a lot of this starts, David, Buffy, I'm sure everybody, Jack, people in here who are seasoned, you're going to start talking through this process as you're showing the house. Agreed? How are we prepping for a buyer before we go to a house? As we all know right now, kind of the list price is a starting point. Are we starting to have conversations with buyers about how that feels? What terms are really important to them? How we can be more strategic? How we can position ourselves? I've already made the call or shot the text or sent an email to the agent. You know, I'm going to be showing 123 Main Street. Other than price, is there anything palatable to your seller that I should be aware of as I speak to my buyers?
Also trying to, part of the preparing is, you know, I always try to do a lot of research on the properties that I'm showing, and, you know, look at the transfer history, look at the MLS history, you know, try to look up the sellers online and see what I can find out about them, just to try to find pain points and motivations. You know, did they just have a baby? Did they just have a life event? You know, just try to prepare that way and get as much knowledge and information as you can about the other side and what's going on, independent of asking the agent, and trying to get some information from them as well. So that's part of what I do to prepare too. I like a lot of information.
I think that's all good advice.
Let me ask you a question, David. What if you've reached out to that agent and you haven't got any response? So you've got nothing. You're going to show the house. How do you prepare, and how do you talk to your clients about that?
Well, like I said, I'm going to do my own investigation anyway. But, you know, I would just tell my client, you know, I'm working on getting some further information. I've reached out to the list agent, and I'm waiting to hear back from them. That's where I would leave it initially.
And if you don't hear back from that agent at all?
Well, then you don't hear back from them. You got to move forward.
Exactly. So as we, and that can be through anything, presenting an offer, through negotiations. I think this is a very important point to bring up, because I know it's very, very frustrating right now to be a buyer's agent and hear nothing from a listing agent.
Yeah.
So, and that can go both ways, right? I find it very frustrating as a listing agent if a buyer just sends me an offer and hasn't sent me a text or left me a voicemail or anything, right? So even if I don't have the time to answer my phone because I have 90 showings and I have 23 offers coming at me, I really do appreciate an agent that's going to pick up the phone and say, hey, you know, Julie, this is Buffy and we just saw your listing. It's in their top 3. I anticipate they'll make an offer. Have you decided how you're going to handle multiple offers or when you would like all offers in by? I think you guys have to understand communication is key. Sometimes a text is okay, but a lot of times picking up the phone and leaving a voicemail and then follow up to my conversation and follow up to my voicemail email to that other agent goes a long way. Because I can't tell you how many times I've received offers from agents who've never texted me, never called me. I had no idea, just an offer appeared in my inbox. What if I didn't get it? What if it went to my junk or my spam?
You know, that comes back to be professional. But you're right, a lot of times you don't get any communication. And in this market, it's more understandable because I've got clients that are asking me, well, you know, can you find out what the average utilities are? Can you find out what the age of the mechanicals are? Now, I think a good agent, and it's something that we do, we get all that information up front, so we don't have to go chase our clients and answer these questions. But a lot of agents don't do that. But so your clients are asking, hey, how old is this hot water tank? How old is the roof? How old is you know, the air conditioning? Can you find out what their gas bill is, what their electric bill is? Well, you know, I'll see what I can do. And now I actually reach out and try to get that information before my showing in this market. But I tell my clients, listen, I'm gonna do my best. I've already sent an email. I'll follow up. I can't guarantee we're going to get anything from that listing agent with as many offers as they're going to get, with the interest that they're going to have. Unfortunately, the list agent's attitude is probably, I don't have time and I don't really care. I don't need to get you this information because I'm already getting offers are pouring in. So
does everybody understand that? A lot of times,
Yeah.
right? It's time is of the essence. So I'm going to speak to it on the other side right now too, as a listing agent. And because there's probably new agents on this Zoom, and although we're talking about negotiations, it comes down to properly preparing your listing to go to market too, right? So just as a side note, a little extra bonus for you guys, when you sit down with a seller to meet with them, I realize there's a sense of urgency to get homes on the market right now, but understand that you having to go back to your list to the seller and ask questions about age of mechanicals, what the utilities are, get invoices for, you know, something that's on that they had to disclose on the RPD, or the beams or that they put in the basement. You as an agent have a responsibility when you're getting that listing agreement executed, or before you go, to send them a little email with some homework they might need. We have an entire packet that we send to our sellers, and it's called Seller's Homework. And when we go to execute listing paperwork, it has a litany list of things that they should have ready for me or from one of my other agents that's listing the home, that they can gather so we can be proactive versus reactive. In a different market, you guys, a buyer's market, not a seller's market, you can lose a buyer because you have to go back and get documents about an HOA and can they put a fence in, and they don't care, they've already moved on to the next home. Now, they might not be applicable in this market, right? But let's not get lazy. Remember, we need to be doing diligence, whether we're working with a seller or a buyer.
I've seen that stuff even, you know, after you've had them fill it out. I go through and just check out stuff every once in a while, and I'll see that they've put that online in the documents, which I think is very helpful.
We only put so much in our documents tab, just as a side note for my team. I want a reason to follow up with my showings, right? So we have an additional home information email that we've created. So we'll make sure the RPD, the lead-based paint disclosure, a survey, you know, anything like that is on the MLS, and Vince could speak to this, but some of those documents like utilities and all that I save because I want a reason to be reaching out and getting feedback, especially in a different market. Like I said, in this market, it's not as applicable, but in a different market, it allows me to be proactive for my sellers and continue to have conversations with buyers agents.
Gotcha.
Let's talk about real quick before we go on to prepare. Well, we are in prepare and learn, but before we go on to, oh my goodness, I guess do. Well, they gave us a scenario to talk about. You guys want to talk about that? Here's a scenario. Your client, pay attention, who am I going to pick on? Justin, you are representing a single buyer. Your client is renting her present property. Like any first-time home buyer, she is looking for you to guide her through the process. The asking price for the home she really loves is $175,000. The house appears to have evidence of a leak, but it's listed as is and is currently priced at its current price.
It is correctly priced.
I'm sorry?
Correctly priced.
Oh, correctly priced, I'm sorry. Your client would like to keep her payments as low as possible since she still has a number of student loans. She would like to write her offer at $155,000. There has been quite a lot of activity on this listing, Justin. How would you talk your buyer through that?
Let's see, okay. So in the market that we're in now, and we've had this discussion already, the lack of inventory has, we know that there's a lack of inventory, so there's a lot of competition, especially at this price point. Now, I've reached out to the listing agent. They have had a lot of interest. They don't have anything in hand just yet, but they have been told that they're expecting 2 offers this afternoon. Now, us going in at $155,000, I understand your concerns and wanting to keep your payment as low as possible, but that is really not going to make us very competitive if they, in the event that they do receive multiple offers.
That's excellent. And I think it comes down to having those conversations and setting expectations, right? So I think it's a good time to talk about what we can patently see when we walk through a home and what is latent for all the new agents. So we're going to, although this is kind of irrelevant in this market because again, the listing price is the starting price, but we're always going to make offers based upon what we patently, what our eyes can patently see as we walk through the home. If we know that the home needs a new roof, it's been disclosed to us or we can see it, at some point our offer may or should reflect that, not necessarily in this market, right? And then we save the remedy period for any latent defects that we can't see. Does everybody understand that? We're not going to make an offer on a home that we absolutely know without question and go 20,000 over list right now, needs a new roof, and then think we're going to try and beat a seller up during a remedy or negotiation process. So it's about, as Justin said, you must be having very clear and concise conversations and setting those expectations up front. Any thoughts on that?
No, what I always like to tell my buyers is I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm not here to tell you you need to do something. I'm here to give you information and give you guidance based upon my experience and my knowledge in this industry and in this market. It's your job to make these decisions. My advice to you would be the 155 is not going to be a competitive offer, like Justin said. I would advise you that we're going to have to go in at list price or above to be competitive in this market. What I would ask you is, if you lose this house and you know how long we've been looking in the other houses we've been looking at, how are you going to feel about losing this house? And go from there.
What other?
I don't really love it, and I'll be okay if I don't get it. Or it would devastate me. I really want this house. Well, then I would suggest that we don't go in at 155.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you ever, like some people have mentioned that, okay, I only want to spend, like you said, 155. But have you ever had them say, how much can you afford to pay monthly? you know, including everything. Have you ever run down that with them or had them talk with their lender about that? So they might be able to afford more than they think?
Sure.
Especially now, I would think in this market that might be something good to present to them.
So I think that's part of the pre-qualifying process, Lori.
Yeah,
So these are questions that I would say to a buyer, possibly very early on.
right.
You know, have you talked to a lender? And the reason I ask is because what you can afford to spend on a home and what your comfort level may be are two different things. So it's really helpful to understand what your buying power is. And then we can talk about what your comfort level is, because again, there's ultimately two different things,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But as far as someone, a payment, I have a really, it's so funny because Justin may speak to this. I have a really easy calculation that I'm happy to share right now. Remember, first, let me give a disclaimer. We are not lenders. That is not our
Right.
wheelhouse, right? So they should always, you know, we should stay within our wheelhouse and leverage and advise that they speak to attorneys or professionals. But I have a really simple mathematical equation that you guys can use if your buyer wants to play with a raw payment. If you'd like me to give it, would anybody care to hear it at all?
Yes.
Justin, Justin, this just helped Justin write an offer over the weekend. I texted it to him. So I'm going to look it up again on my text. Did you win, Justin?
We did not.
Darn it.
Beat out by Cash.
Was that Driftfield?
No, that was Beaver Run.
Okay, moving on. Okay, so here's an easy mathematical equation, if anybody would care. So you take the house price and divide it by 1,000, right? So if a home, and that's, I'm just gonna read this text I sent Justin, to be honest. You take the house price and you divide it by 1,000. You times that number by a base rate. That is your principal payment. You take the taxes of that listing and divide it by 12. That's your tax payment per month. I always take $750 to $1,250 and divide that by 12. Depending on the price of a home, that's your monthly insurance payment. You add all those together, and that's a way to play with your base mortgage payment. Remember, this does not take into consideration the down payment that they already have. So let me spell that out for a $250,000 home. $250,000 divided by 1,000 is $250. $250 times 3.5% is $875. Taxes, 5,400 divided by 12 is 450. 750 for insurance payment divided by 12 is $62.50. So I have 875 plus 450 plus 6250 is $1,387.60. That is a really easy way to have my base payment that does not take into consideration their down payment. Now, again, we're not lenders. Go ahead, Vince.
I just typed that into the chat as well as Julie was talking, so you can have it to write down.
I actually had a lender give that to me a long time ago, so I don't know if that helps anyone, but it's just a really easy way to play with the payment. Be very careful and understand that, what that means, before you go giving that or telling people to do that. Because people always ask all the time, I want my payment to be around this. Well, that's a way to play with a payment. Make sense?
And you could also talk to your lender if you have a preferred lender. And a lot of them have a breakdown graph or chart that you could give to your client, and it'll, with the rates across the top and house prices down the side, and it gives you a raw payment based upon the price and the interest rate. Your lender might be able to give you something like that. And that it would be an easy reference for your client to look at. Okay, at this interest rate, at this price, this would be my raw payment, not inclusive of taxes and interest.
And going back to the scenario that we had Justin play out, which he did amazing. We just honestly have to ask questions and let our clients give answers and watch their body language, right? So you may ask something like, what is it about this house that makes it your favorite? How would you feel if you lost this home, right? What is your walkaway number, Justin? You know, if this home is listed at 175 and we only want to put in 155, which we know right now is crazy, you know, we're asking our clients questions like this right now. When they say, well, you know, do you think $5,000 more would do it? Well, do you have, if they have $5,000 more to put in, would you be really disappointed if you lost it? I would encourage you to put in a number that is your walkaway number, because right now there is not a lot of negotiating going on, and they've asked us to put our best foot forward. If that is your best foot and we don't win in this scenario at that number and these terms, are you okay with it? You guys have to learn to have really clear and concise conversations with your buyers and sellers right now.
Yeah, and going back to what you just said, there's not a lot of negotiation going on right now. It's basically from the buyer's perspective, give them everything they want and more, which is making it, for people that are new to the industry, that's why this class is kind of important, because that's going to change and you're going to have to know how to negotiate.
So let's talk about presenting the offer. We talked a little bit about this. In my opinion, your first interaction and how you're going to present your client starts when you respect the showing instructions of a home, right? Or if you happen to be walking through a home and it's you know, there's 60 people in it and you notice something's off, call the agent when you leave and say, hey, I just left the home and it's beautiful. I just wanted to let you know that you're out of shoe covers, that it looks a little bit in disarray. You might want to get over there and check on it. We weren't party to all that, but a check by you wouldn't hurt. Do you understand? You're building a rapport with agents in the industry is just as important as you building a rapport with your client.
Yeah, that goes a long way. We just had a deal here back in February with all that snow and ice and salt, and an agent called us and said, hey, just want to give you a heads up, nobody is wearing shoe covers in your house and the wood floors are destroyed in here. And I'm so appreciative of that. When an agent calls me and says, hey, Julie, you know, that it looks like I've had people call me and say, I think they broke the lock to the front door. It's all scratched up and I had a hard time getting in. You know, be present with your buyers and be respectful of that seller's home, and make sure that you're calling the agent and alerting them to anything. I mean, that's reciprocity, you guys. That's what we're here for. Part of what we do, because right now our offers aren't getting accepted, is we're not only, again, building a relationship with our buyers, but you are building a relationship with other agents in the industry, and your reputation matters. I know that I take very seriously on myself and my team's reputation in the industry, because when I send an offer to Buffy, I want her to say to her seller, Julie and her team are amazing to work with. They will get this deal to the closing table. So out of 23 offers, if I have a good reputation on how I behaved in the home, how I expect my clients to behave, she knows I brought a pre-qualified buyer, I've presented the offer with all the information that needs to be presented, right? It's going to bear weight with a listing agent. Does that make sense to some of the newer agents here?
Absolutely. You guys have talked to me about that quite a bit, and it's sunk in. So it's very helpful.
So let's talk a little bit about, I'm going to bounce all over the place.
That makes a big difference, like too, Joy, what you were saying, because a lot of times it does come down to, hey, you know, I like working with this agent. I know they're gonna be very fair. They're gonna work their butts off to make sure we get to the closing table. I know it's gonna be an easy transaction. This is who I want to work with, and it does happen that way sometimes. Hey, I want you to win this deal. Here, it does happen, because
I've heard horror stories about people an agent is so bad that they don't want to show houses she has listed. I don't know who it is. Nobody said, but apparently people that have been in the industry much longer than me know who it is. So talking about reputation, that's
Yeah.
explains why you need to be so professional.
Well, and I think that you have to remember that, and I'm going to go into writing a contract for a little bit, because I don't know how many people on here are really new, but there's a couple things that you need to consider when you're writing an offer and that contract, right? So this is kind of how I explain, if anyone cares to hear, the contract to our buyer, just a brief synopsis. You know, we're very blessed here in Central Ohio. Our contract is written for us by the Columbus Bar Association. It is basically a fill in the blank. A seasoned agent like myself, we're going to add additional terms and conditions to that offer that will make it more palatable to the seller, right? One of those may be palatable to the seller and to protect you as a buyer. One of those conditions, now I want you guys to know this is written into our new contract, but this is something I used to say. One of the additional terms and conditions you may see me put in your offer is, if said property does not appraise for at or above the agreed upon purchase price shall be renegotiated or contracted null and void, right? So you're talking to your buyer about how you're going to present an offer, how you're going to write it, how you're going to structure it, that is going to not only leverage what you have to win, but is also going to look professional and clean to the agent. So let's talk briefly on that offer and things we can do to make it look clean. Tell me some things that you guys think that you should do with your offers to ensure that they look very clean and concise when you're prepping them.
Something David told me that he did is just when he goes through the house is he'll actually write down like the models and the of appliances and heaters and electric, just to be very specific when he writes in the contract. So just to, I mean, be able to be, you've been so observant that you can write exactly what's in there. So I thought that was, you know, and he says he lists everything despite what it says, you know, on the contract that is pre-written, just to make it
not
very
everything, but you're talking about it, you know, under the additional terms and conditions, is it paragraph 5.1, the inclusions, right? So 5.1 has that whole list of things that are included now, right?
Right.
And it's kind of, you know, the analogy, anything that's glued, screwed, or nailed, right?
Right.
But we reiterate what? Sparkle? What do we reiterate right there in 5.1? Anybody?
I know I've put in there that all the appliances that were there during the showing.
Very good.
I've added that in there. That's something Bucky taught me when I first started writing contracts, like, because people will put good appliances in and then you get to close it and it's like, where does white refrigerator now match?
Amen.
We rented it.
Good girl. That's what we were going to talk about. So I'm going to tell you, so as you're walking through those showings, you can get very detailed here. You know, stainless side-by-side Samsung refrigerator, right? But you want to reiterate those appliances because they can literally be, if they're not built in, they can be unplugged and taken away. So I'm going to tell you one of my biggest pet peeves of all time right here that I really struggle seeing an offer, and I'm going to give everybody who decided to be on this call some very sage advice from a seasoned agent. Don't ever write in there as disclosed or written in MLS number 2100158 da 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 da. Ever. Why do you think that is? And I have 3 agents on this call on my team. They better speak up.
The MLS is an advertisement, not a contract.
Justin was going to say it. Go ahead, Justin.
Well, David already did. I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's an advertisement.
The MLS
Not
is
a
an
guarantee.
advertisement. It is not a contract between 2 parties. You must reiterate everything in the contract. If I see an agent put as seen in MLS number, and this is the number, you've just made my job harder because in my counter, now I have to reiterate every appliance that I'm going to convey to you, and I'm annoyed with you.
Besides writing them down, what you've, like she said, you know, as seen in the home, I've also said as seen in the home and in the pictures. Do you ever do that?
No, because again, the MLS is an advertisement. But what you can say, to Janae's point, and she said it perfectly, you know, the items are going to convey, and including the following, you know, side-by-side stainless refrigerator, blah, 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 this, blah, 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 this, as seen on the showing of Monday, April 5th, as aforementioned items shall convey as seen as a buyer's last showing. I'm trying to go from memory, you guys, on buyer's last showing on Saturday, April 3rd at noon.
Okay.
I'm always going to reference the last time we saw those, right? I'm always going to protect my buyer. Janae, that sounds like what Buffy's taught you, and that's spot on. Spectacular.
Yeah, I think best practices for me has always been, I do my best to write down the specific appliances that are there. Samsung stainless steel refrigerator, GE 5-burner electric stove, or you know, Whirlpool 5-burner gas stove, LG dishwasher, built-in, you know, GE microwave. I get very specific.
Yeah. And it's really easy when you guys, if you're walking through a property and your buyer loves it, to try and jot down what you can, or even, you know, I know that depending on what it says on the MLS, but take a quick photo with your phone. Not for you to use, right? Especially depending on what the disclosure items on the MLS are, but so you can write proper stuff into the contract, especially if they have a wine cooler in the basement, because a wine cooler or a dishwasher and a wet bar, those would be conveyable items. They're not chattel, right? But you got to make sure you include them, right? To protect your buyer, unless they've excluded them. And then right below 5.1 and 5.2, right, Vince, is it 5.2? Is where you write down anything the seller has excluded. So pay attention to what the MLS says. A good listing agent is going to use that to give you all the information you need, including under the document tabs in the agent to agent remarks, to write the cleanest offer you can out of the gate. Use it, read it, understand what it means. I'm going to tell you another one of my pet peeves, but I learned this from an attorney a long time ago. There should never, ever be a blank in your contract. So if the buyer isn't paying cash, N/A, not applicable. Go on to the next page, write in, you know, the number of days. Even if it says if this is left blank, then the buyer will present their lender letter in 5 days or whatever. I can't stand to see a blank in a contract. And I'm going to tell you who else doesn't like to see blanks in contract. Buffy will back me on this. The Division of Real Estate and any court in the state of Ohio does not like to see a blank in a contract. So even if it's not applicable, you should put not applicable in that blank. There's a lot of gray in how we talk. There's a lot of art to negotiating how we talk. But what I will train to every time is that contract, there's no gray there. One word can make the difference. You want me to tell you how I know that? Because I bought refrigerators before. I've bought garage doors. I've paid to have people's houses clean. After 15 years, you know, you make mistakes and you just, you do the right thing. I will tell you, I was on vacation one time and I had an agent write an offer for me, and she did not write in the stove, right, that can be unplugged. And literally David and I were out of town, and when we came back in town and went through, it was when we were newer in the business, went through the final walkthrough with our buyers, the stove was gone. And we called the listing agent. She was like, you didn't write it in the contract. Well, even though I was angry because obviously it was an error on the agent that was covering us part, I didn't have a leg to stand on. Thank you so much. Didn't matter. And I called my clients and said, go down to Lowe's and pick out whatever you like, and it'll be delivered when you take possession. You learn real quick.
Yeah, you do. And I bought a few appliances in my time as well. But one of the things that I always will say is that I literally learn something from every transaction. Every transaction I learn something. So whether it's something I want to continue doing or add to my toolbox, or what I don't want to ever do again, I learn something with every transaction.
Great.
Yeah. And speaking of clean offers, can you also speak to the possession portion of the contract?
You're gonna have to give me more. I'm not sure where you want me to go.
About specifics, a date and a time.
Oh, I hate that. Yeah, we've got burned on that. Don't ever put possession. This is just another, I'm going over some pet peeves since nobody's talking. So Buffy, this is my way to like tell everybody, this is how I want my offers received. I don't like to see 3 days after closing, because if the closing, it just can be a really gray area. And sometimes people don't understand how to count their days properly. So for me, you know, closing to be on or before April 1st, seller to retain possession through Monday, April 5th at 6:00 p.m. Be very clear. Don't just put 3 days, because there just should not be gray there, you guys. And it can definitely cause issues. And you want to get ahead of any type of issue that could arise. That's your job as a negotiating professional. What can I do to get ahead and be proactive for my clients? I don't even know where we are on our PowerPoint, but one more thing I want to talk about while we're talking about writing contracts is how we present them. We're going to go back to calling the other agent and things like that. So does anybody have any thoughts or questions on how should you present an offer to a listing agent properly? And I guess not properly isn't the right word, highest and best.
I'm confused what you mean. You mean like if they've asked highest and best, or?
I'm sorry. No, not highest and best, but just how we send the offer, how we make it look professional. Do you guys do a breakdown? We kind of do a breakdown with ours. So we're going to send an offer, you know, David, my buyers are pleased to present an offer on your lovely listing at 123 Main Street. Please see attached. Below are the finer points of the offer. I stole that from an agent a long time ago and I loved it. And we'll break down purchase price if they're giving an appraisal delta. So we'll break down further in the email everything that's maybe inclusive, just to make sure that that agent sees it.
Also, to put everything in one email. Don't send every PDF as a separate email.
That's kind of a struggle sometimes, you guys, for a listing agent. So that's a good point Michael made. And I think that's one of the drawbacks of .loop. So I'm going to speak from like a legal standpoint right now, and what I've been trained and guided by an amazing real estate attorney that at one point helped in past, Jamie Zeitzman, who helped write our standard board contract. You should never just be sending an offer through .loop and saying, sign it, right? You should always ensure that it's somehow attached to a PDF and sent to your buyers. And I'm going to upload this into .loop or put it back into .loop, or make sure, you know, check where you need to sign. But you need to have some type of written documentation that you've sent that to your buyers for review. And would you like to discuss it? If you're using .loop, are you clicking that the PDFs are attached? Are you breaking down the offer in that? I'm not a fan of .loop, and I know Buffy just unmuted herself, but we have to be very careful in our fiduciary here. Buffy?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and this depends on how savvy my buyer is. If we work together and they bought 5 or 6 houses, I don't do this. But for new buyers, when I write that first offer, I actually send the paperwork to them. I don't send the attachments. I send the paperwork to them view only. And then I walk through every one of those documents with them. And then I send it to them for signature.
We do that too. I don't use .loop, you guys. We use DocuSign and Forms R Us. So I will actually download the offer, make sure it's all together, right? So it's not 10 PDFs. I'll send it to them and I'll say, I'm going to call you, and I'll go over every page of that document and what it means. And then I'll upload it to DocuSign for signatures. And when I send it to the listing agent, and to Buffy's point, it depends on the relationship with the buyer. If it's your first offer with them, if it's the 10th offer you've written for them, or if they're savvy. A lot of times when I send an offer to a listing agent, I blind copy my buyers, so they know that I sent it, or I'll forward it after I send it and say, see below, sent, right? I'm constantly communicating with with my buyers and my sellers so they know exactly what is going on, exactly what to expect, when the next time I'm going to be contacting them in, when the listing agent said that she will respond or he will respond to all offers, right? It really comes down to that communication.
It also too, having a trail of communication that you can show between you and your client. I think that's important.
For sure.
So there's an email that shows this is what we discussed, the attached offer with the terms that we discussed. And this is what I'm going to upload into DocuSign or Dotloop or whatever you use. That way you have a record and documentation of we talked about this, we went over this.
It's really important.
And to add to that, they're also very good at any conversation that's pertinent to the deal with the buyers. There will always be a follow-up to our conversation detailing everything that went through and sent to the buyers as well, just to have that trail.
Did everyone hear that? That is extremely important after 15 years. I can tell you we do a lot of this, right? Do you see me? Texting. And that's totally fine because you meet me at the house at 9, do this. I'm working on the offer now. But when you're discussing terms with a buyer or seller, when you're discussing something of substance, I promise you it is worth your while to send an email and follow up to our conversation. I'm going to be doing this. It takes extra time, but it is your fiduciary obligation. And the minute something happens, you're going to have to produce that communication. And entities at the state level like to see email communication. They do not like to see text messages. When I have a really in-depth conversation with another agent, if I've talked to them about negotiations, I will also take the time to send in follow, hey, Janae, in follow up to our conversation, these are the terms that you're looking for. Thank you for, formally giving me a couple more hours. I'm struggling to get in communication with my sellers right now. He's in a meeting. I'll circle back to you as soon as possible. You better have that in writing, you guys. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I've noticed through this whole thing that Vince knows all of your pet peeves and how you operate.
Well, he has been with me. How many years have you been happy to know me?
5.
March was our 5th.
Did I not celebrate? Yeah, I told you. Happy to know me.
Yeah.
We just celebrated our 5 years happy to know me, Vince and I.
Oh, congratulations.
And nobody can have him. I love him. I'm keeping him. Stay away. If he leaves, I'm leaving with him. You guys, we have about a half hour left.
I don't think he.
We have about a half hour left, and we've gone on and off topic. I know people have been very quiet, but I want you to ask us questions. There's a lot of seasoned people on this call. Let's ask questions about struggles you're having. Questions, even if you think they're stupid, which they're not. Let's just open it up for some banter right now. While I look through and see if there's anything else important I was supposed to go over. This is harder on Zoom than I thought it was going to be, for the record, everyone. Trying to keep my papers straight, the Zoom straight.
I've had buyers, once they get their closing costs sheet at the end and see how much they have to pay and how much the seller has to pay, and then they want to start asking for stuff right then. Well, I think they should pay my closing costs. Like, we are way far beyond asking to negotiate a couple of days beforehand. So closing costs and things like that, I've had to have talks with 2 clients to just say, hey, we had that opportunity a long time ago. And it was helpful for me that it was an email and I was able to send it to them and say, remember, we had this back then, and talked about closing costs and what you were going to ask them and what you wanted me to put in the contract, because they will switch it up in the end or start getting nervous. I don't know.
I'm curious, why did they get to that point? Are you telling me it's because they thought the seller had gotten too much, or they saw net proceeds, or?
Net proceeds.
Okay.
And then it's like, I don't want to pay all of this, or, this isn't what I expected. And it's like, this is exactly what we talked about, and you should have been expecting this. So
At that point, I would probably start asking some questions too, Janae. So I would go back and say, if I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you are really, really happy with price we're in contract for. And Janae, we did negotiate with them to do a few small repairs that really did present a safety deficiency or true hazard, even though it was as is. So while I understand that looking at what a seller in this market is taking away, that particular ship has sailed. We've already negotiated through price and terms. So, but I think in totality, we're really excited about where we're at. Am I wrong or right? And I would also, and this is if you're a little bit more seasoned and have been around a long time, but, I think in a different market, people get hung up on what a seller paid for a property too. But remember, on the flip side, as the market, what a seller paid is irrelevant to what fair market is. In any market, you guys, I mean, I remember showing homes in the downturn where people were bringing $500,000 to the table or $50,000 to the table to close a deal. So if you feel comfortable, you could say that, well, in a different market, the seller could actually be bringing funds to the table. Would you be willing to give your closing costs away at that point? Right? It's irrelevant at the end of the day what a seller owes on it, what they feel they deserve out of it, or what they need to get out of it. What's relevant is what the market will bear and what two parties agree. Because ultimately, Janae, you know what a home is worth? It's worth what a buyer is willing to pay and a seller is willing to take. That's what a home is worth. And I'll have that conversation with my clients over and over again. All the other things are irrelevant. The market will decide, and a buyer and seller will decide what this home is worth.
That particular client, I was able to, some of the things that they were coming back saying that they wanted fixed, but they didn't say before, I was just able to link them with some contractors that didn't cost that much, that are fair and reasonable, and they were able to get it fixed. So,
I think that brings up a good point too, from a listing agent perspective. So, and I know again, the market that we're in, but something that I say when I'm walking through a listing is, I'll say, when we talk about what we really need to do to prep our home for market, right? And I always say, I'll use $1,000. So for a round figure, Janae. So for every $1,000 that we don't spend, that we truly need to present your home to market, a buyer will beat us up 10 times that. Right? So $1,000 in paint to a buyer that is cash poor right now and going over list can look like a $15,000 negotiation, or in the reverse in this market can actually net us $10,000 more by simply painting and putting $500 worth of paint in. So I think it's those conversations.
Julie, I have a question for you as a listing agent in this market.
Oh boy.
Well, no, just, because houses are selling so quickly, and I know it depends on the price point and, if it is in horrible shape or whatever, but on an average house in like a $500,000-$600,000 price range, do you have people get upset with you if that house doesn't sell right away? Just because they hear, oh, these houses are selling in 3 days or a week or whatever?
I think it's about getting ahead of that. So you should be having the conversation about the absorption rate for that neighborhood before you even, list the home. And something that our market is going to start to shift a little bit, you guys, hopefully, right, for all of us, because it's a little crazy right now. And I promise you, as a listing agent, it's not fun for listing agents either. To try and manage 90 showings and 90 phone calls and 90 text messages times 10 and emails and 15 offers. And I really feel strongly about my follow-up to all of the buyer's agents and making personal phone calls. So I try to put myself in a buyer's agent's shoes when it comes to communication. So I think, Lori, the answer to the question is, it's about the communication up front. What is the absorption rate for that neighborhood, right? Does everybody understand what absorption rate means, right? From
Right.
the time the home is listed till the time it goes into contract, that's the absorption rate. Have I had conversations with them about that? Do they know, is it a rural property? Is the absorption rate different? Are we in a higher price point market, like for example, in New Albany Country Club or Old Muirfield, where the homes tend to show a little bit more dated, or we're a higher price point, and maybe those homes are sitting on the market for 90 days right now. And when I say sitting on the market for 90 days, I almost want to laugh out loud, because I remember a market when homes were sitting on the market for 18 months at those price points. So I think it's not, you know, I guess I would go back to this. When I sit down with any seller, I tell them this, and a buyer, there are 4 things that will make or break a real estate sale: condition and location. Where is our location, right? Is there anything, do we back up to railroad tracks? Do we back up to a power tower? Condition and location. Access to the home for showings. Pricing, how you price your home, and who you hire to market your home. If those, location and condition, access to the home for showings, the price of your home, the price we present to market, and who you hire to market your home. If those 4 things are in line, your home will sell. It will sell within reason of the normal absorption rate for your neighborhood. And that's a conversation to have before you ever list the home, Lori. So you're setting those expectations. Another conversation that I have with my clients in a different market too, but is, you know, price adjustments, right? How we can price our home anywhere, but we need to be ready to adjust based upon how the market is going to react. I'll give you another statistic that is better in a different market, but you guys can write this down. 65% of your showings will take place in your first 6 weeks on market. The ancillary 35% will take place over the next 18 weeks on market. How important is it that you present properly with those statistics? Now that's in a different market, you guys, but in a balanced market, that is a raw statistic. So basically, Lori, the answer is to your question, how has the market reacted? What has our feedback been? How many showings have we had? How many second showings have we had? Have we had any offers, right? That's the conversation I'm going to have. Well,
before, yeah.
Well, before, but then during the process,
but then during,
I'm going to look at how many showings I've had, how many second showings I have had, how many offers I've had, you know, have I had multiple offers? Because in the first 10 showings or 21 days at that price point, Lori, to your point, at that 500,000 and above, 10 days or 10 showings or 21 days. That's going to be my gauge. And then based upon how many showings I've had, how many second showings I've had, how many offers I had, I know the percentage that I need to adjust. Am I a 1 to 3% price adjustment? Am I a 3 to 5% price adjustment? Or am I a 5 or greater price adjustment? And that depends on my showings, second showings, and my offers, and how the market has reacted. So there's not a concrete answer. It's a fluid answer based on how the market has reacted and how you've taken that data and how you're going to go back and have a conversation with your clients around that data.
Well, I'm guessing though that there are some clients, if you're getting offers, then that are pretty stuck in their head what they think they should get, or else the offers just were really bad.
Well, that's a very good point. Let's talk about negotiating from that standpoint, not from a seller standpoint, but from a buyer's agent or a seller's agent. I am a avid proponent of the ball will never, and Michael and Justin are probably laughing right now, will never die in my court. Even if I send a counter offer back to a seller, or as a listing agent, send a counter offer back to a buyer's agent with the exact same number, I will, as a way to slap their hand, no. Our last counter offer was really our last counter offer. I will make sure that every time that ball dies in the other person's court. It will never die in my court. Does everybody understand that? Why that's important? The conversation doesn't end with me. I want to extend the last hand. And if that buyer's agent or seller's agent wants to come back to me, I want that door to be open. I would highly recommend too that you never put best and final in a counter offer. it sets a very bad taste in the mouth of the person who's receiving it. Right? So in your email to the agent, because we work in reciprocity, I can send it to Buffy and say, hey, Buffy, I really struggle to get them to this number. Do your best. I think I'm losing leverage here, right? I can be very strategic in how I have a conversation with another agent. But as I know Buffy is a professional, she's going to buffer that emotionality, and we're going to work through that. And so she knows what I mean. But to send something to a seller or back to a buyer and put best and final, how do you think that reads to a buyer or seller?
Sounds kind of arrogant, first of all.
Well, it sounds like, we're stopping the conversation here. We're done with you.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
You've just cut off the ability to keep the conversation going.
And in this market, it's like, oh, okay, well, on to the next contract.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, you guys, 15 more minutes. What other questions do we have? What did you hope to glean out of this class that I haven't touched on yet? Please ask, throw it at me. I think I'm warmed up now.
I wish you could teach every class, because you're one of the, as far as I'm concerned, you're one of the best teachers.
I started out so bad on this one, you guys, but thank you. I'd rather do this and talk through than I'd rather be in person, number one.
Well, yeah.
Miss everybody, but it's hard to do the Zoom and all that. So Vince, you know me. What have we missed? What should we go over? Justin, Michael, Dino, what have we missed talking about that we should impart some wisdom on these amazing men and women here?
I have a question. If something is being sold as is, so like in the previous example we did a while back, how does that change your negotiation strategy?
That's a very good question. I don't want to teach anybody any bad habits, so I'm afraid to say. So I think Buffy will mirror me. So I'm going to say something, but then we're going to talk about it. So I want everybody to understand something. As is never really as is. So keep that in the back of your mind. And that's more of a discussion with your seller, right? So I would say, Amanda, if you were my seller, and they're saying, we want to sell as is, I'll be absolutely, I understand. And you know what? A buyer is going to make an offer based upon what they patently can see. But understand, if there's something that's uncovered through an inspection, even though it's as is, that we would have to now disclose on our residential property disclosure, Amanda, or that we would have to repair for any other buyer, I want you to be open to a conversation with these buyers in doing so. Does that make sense?
Exact same conversation I have.
Amen. Julie and Buffy are on the same page.
Yep.
So I hesitate on that, Buffy. I want to be careful. I don't want you to necessarily go tell your buyers as is, it's never as is, right? Because you're setting an expectation that might be unrealistic. But I do want you, when you're discussing with your buyers as is, I want you to say to them, what that means is they are really at this point in this market not willing to make any repairs. But understand, Amanda, if we do our inspection and the sump pump isn't working, that could cause a real problem for them and a flood before we close. So we can go back to them and say, you know what, before my buyer terminates, Buffy, we just wanted to let you know that the sump pump isn't working. Would the seller be willing to give any consideration or do anything for us in that arena?
And I think along these lines, a good thing for you to talk about, Julie, is how you talk your sellers through request remedies, maybe when they're a bit more than they had been expecting, since that's a very important part of the negotiation process.
Sure. First of all, let's go back to Amanda. Did that help, Amanda, clarify that? Because I can go a little deeper.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And I get concessions quite frequently on deals that were as is.
Me too, to be honest. And you know what it's about, you guys? It's about conversation and communication with your co-op agents, and also keeping your buyers and sellers' emotions down and calm. So I think what Vince is speaking to is, and this is more on the listing agent side, so I apologize, but if I can impart any wisdom on you guys. I always tell my sellers that regardless, I don't know if that was the right vernacular, of what comes at us, we are going to respond rather than react. And I can tell you that I just worked through a $40,000 request to remedy on a listing I had. And we got it down after 5 days to $2,900. And how I did that is I asked my sellers to allow me to meet my contractors at the home, address every item that the buyer had requested. I got a structural engineer at the house. They had, for some reason, had in their mind they needed 9 beams. We only needed 1 beam, right? So you respond with knowledge, right? You do a seller's response to the buyer's request to remedy with factual documentation and estimates from a licensed professional. And while I adore our home inspectors, I want you guys to remember that a licensed contractor or a structural engineer is going to beat what that inspector said. They trump it. They're the professional. That inspector is a general doctor. He's a family physician. He's given a physical to the home and suggesting or pointing out things that he thinks may need further diligence. As a listing agent or a buyer's agent, our responsibility is to help our clients understand what further diligence we need to do to respond accordingly. And one of the ways we do that when we get a buyer's request to remedy is taking the time to gather factual estimates and documentation. So when we send a response back, we can do it accordingly. And yeah, I just realized Sparkle is on this call, and we had this on a property. And I was very detailed, right, Sparkle, in my response and structural engineered responses. And this is what we're going to do. And everybody was very happy. And we made sure the buyer was very well taken care of.
I don't know if this is,
I'm going to let Sparkle, she took herself off mute, add to that if she wants to, if she cares to.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely.
Can you hear me?
Yep, now we can.
Okay. I was just going to say that structural engineer report also helped me keep those buyers kind of like calm, because they were worried when the inspectors came in and they were saying how they couldn't get back in that hole. And so I just basically relayed the information back to them like, well, this is a licensed structural engineer. And you know, I was just telling them, if this is wrong, that person could lose their license, and they don't want to do that. So I don't know why they would
absolutely
sign off on something and not guarantee it.
Well, it just goes back to what I just reiterated, and Sparkle made a great case for it. Again, having the conversation with your buyer. You know, we'll ask the seller to do further diligence, but as a listing agent, making sure that I'm just not responding or I'm just not reacting in my request to remedy response or my seller's response, that I'm providing documentation from licensed professionals. Because honestly, a home inspector may see a little bowing in the wall, you guys, and it's his job to say, hey, I recommend having that looked at. There could be a problem. But a structural engineer coming in and putting their stamp on a document and saying there is no issue here is really the final word, right? So you have to be able to have those conversations with your buyers too, so they understand, right, that inspector's job is to point out things that may need further discussion. Buffy?
Yeah, I was actually just thinking about the best way to share with buyers when you have inspectors who are just a little overzealous in their information.
They're very excited about it, right, Buffy?
Yes. And they, you know, what could have been one sentence turns into a page and a half and is typically a non-issue. But when you see all of that, or when you have an inspector that, you know, has deemed themselves like the knower of everything, it can be difficult to calm down that fire when they see all of that. And I mean, everything that you talked about does bring that sense of calm, but I was just trying to think about how do you even prepare them up front without negatively, because when you see that inspection,
It's
that
shocking.
name come across. No, I'm talking about when the inspection has been ordered and you see the name of the inspection company, and you're like, oh, we're gonna be in for a ride.
That's how I felt on the one that I got a $40,000 repair request on, right, Vince? The minute I saw the inspection company, I was like, darn it.
Yep.
Every time.
I knew what I was in for, and that's what happened.
They specialize in problems.
Yeah, so I think, Buffy, we can brainstorm here, but honestly, you guys, I think it's about having a conversation with your buyer really proactively before that inspector walks in the home about what they may see, what that could feel like, right? Sometimes what I'll do, depending on when I get the inspection report back, Buffy, and how many days I have, I'll forward the inspection report back to my buyers. I'll lay out, attached is the inspection report, is the radon, is this, and, remember, we're going to go through the realtor's extended summary, line item by line item. We want to really focus on things that present a true deficiency or a safety hazard as we work towards our buyer's request to remedy for the seller. And sometimes I'll send that and make them sleep on it. And that's another tactic I use if I get an offer in a different market and I know that my sellers are going to feel like it's a low ball. I'll send the offer and a really nice breakdown to my sellers, and I'll say, what's the best time to talk tomorrow morning? And I won't respond that night. If I get an offer at 6 o'clock and I have till 6 o'clock the next night, you guys, I don't necessarily have to rush to present that. I can present that in a really nice fashion that's going to allow my sellers to start a conversation, and let's focus on this offer and the terms and talk about how clean it is, right? Other than price. And I know I bounced all over there, but the point is the conversation is the same. Whether we're talking about an inspection report or whether we're talking with our sellers about a lowball offer, what they consider a lowball, but what we know is not really that bad, right? It's all about getting ahead of that conversation with your clients. And sometimes I find that if I can manipulate the time, I'm going to make everybody sleep on it. Because I'm going to tell you something, nothing good happens at 9 o'clock at night when everybody is tired from working all day and your sellers get an offer they hate. Nothing as good is going to come out of that conversation. I don't know if anybody would agree with that, but in my 15 years of experience, I can tell you that is the case more likely than not. And I'm not at my best to negotiate with my own client on why they're being ding-dongs at 10 o'clock at night. So you are allowed as a buyer's agent or a listing agent. Let me tell you very clearly, we do need to present things in a time is of the essence manner, but you also are the professional, and how you present that information should be on how you best present something when you're at your best during the day, not rushed. When you can clearly send an email and say, please find attached an offer from so-and-so. I've broken down the offer in my email. I'll be calling you at 6:30 this evening to discuss. I'll be calling you at 7 a.m. to discuss. And let them respond in that email any way they want. We hate this offer. We are inclined not to respond, Julie. And you know what? I don't even respond to that email because I know they just need to calm down for a minute. It is our job as the professional to set the expectations about how our buyers and sellers are to behave as well. Don't be afraid to do that. I'm sure Buffy would speak to that too, but there's an art there too, you guys. When you're at your best, when you know your clients are at their best, if it's right in the middle of dinner, know when to give and receive information.
I don't know if this is kind of off topic or not, but, and it maybe not necessarily for this market, but I was reading through some stuff the other day that's saying it might be in the best interest of the sellers to have their own, I'm not gonna be able to think of the word, inspection done. Do you ever do that, or would you do it in another market, when things are different?
I'm going to tell you that you can ask 20 people that question and they'll all answer it different. I can only speak to you from how I feel about that. So
Well,
I don't even know. I mean, honestly, and Buffy may feel differently. I am not a fan of a pre-list inspection.
Mm-hmm.
Because now we've uncovered something that we may have to repair. Not that I'm trying to, hide things.
Right.
And then another inspector is going to find something completely different.
Gotcha.
So that's my personal opinion. And to this day, after 15 years, I haven't changed it. Now, I know every attorney on the face of the earth, including Jamie Zeitzman, who I adore dearly, is going to disagree with that. But that's my personal thought. Buffy?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree. But then it also depends on the property and or the client. There are some situations where I do suggest that they have a pre-inspection. And it's often when I'm working with an investor that is only doing so much of the work. And it's clear to me that we're going to have some issues.
Right.
When we get to the point of contract and inspection, I usually will make the request, like, you should consider having an inspection done. And this is typically one individual in particular who doesn't ever want to fix anything once they're in contract. They want somebody to purchase it as is, and they get a little irritated if they come back and ask for anything. And I'm like, well, you should probably consider getting an inspection up front and then getting everything fixed.
Exactly. It goes back to communication and know your audience. There's never, you guys, I mean, every day I learned something new last year about RPD disclosures that Vince still makes fun of me after 14 years. And I literally fought with clients about it. And I'm like, oh, I was really wrong about that. But I'm going to tell you, there's never going to be a cookie cutter, because this industry is ever changing and ever evolving, and regulations are ever changing and ever evolving. And every single contractual negotiation you go into, or every meeting with a seller or a buyer, to Buffy's point, is different. And that would speak to Lori, the inspection thing, but I would also speak to appraisal. I really don't care about a seller getting an appraisal, because honestly, fair market is fair market. And I go back to what I said. What is a home worth? It's worth what a buyer is willing to pay and a seller is willing to take. Now, if there's a real unrealistic expectation there, we have a really unique property like massive acreage, equestrian. Yeah, maybe there is a case for a seller getting a private appraisal up front. But I think they're very few and far between. I really do.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome. You guys, it's 1:02. I just dropped my pen, sorry. Any last minute questions or thoughts before I bid you adieu? Did this
No, I
help?
just want to thank you very much. Yeah, it's very helpful.
You're very welcome. I hope to co-op with all of you. I've had the pleasure of co-oping with a couple people on this call. And just remember that, we are held to a higher standard, and we are to set expectations, and we are professionals. And it's really important how we handle ourselves, not only with our clients, but to other agents. So go out there, you guys, and be better. Be better for everyone. That's it. That's all I got. Have a good day. Bye,
Thank
guys.
you so much.
You're so welcome. Have a good day.